So how does web scraping work? Well, when we scrape the web, we essentially write code that sends a request to the server that's hosting the page that we've asked for. When the server receives that request, it will then return the source code, which is predominantly HTML, for the page that we've requested. So for example, if I were to open up my browser and simply enter the URL www.weather.gov, what we've done here is sent a server that hosts this page a request with a specific URL, which is us asking the server to then return the code for that page. So as you can see, the National Weather Service's website has now appeared and it's brought back the code for us. Now what you're seeing on screen is a nicely rendered website which is appealing to the eye. You can't see any code here, but behind the scenes, this web page is simply a bunch of code files. HTML code files for the page's layout, there may be some CSS files for the styling, some JavaScript files for the interactivity, but it's just a bunch of files. And just to prove this, if I go to the top right of my browser, select the ellipses, go down to More Tools, and then click on Developer Tools. And depending on the browser that you're using, you'll also have some form of developer tools that you can utilize. This then brings up the code that supports this web page. So without going into too much detail in this video, you can see that when I hover over different parts of the code, the actual web page highlights what part of the page that code relates to. So I'm able to pick something on the website and find it in the code file. For example, let's say I wanted to find this summary text here. Well, inside the code body, if I hover over some of these div tags, we can see that our information isn't in the header, it's not in the footer, it's in this part of the code here. If I extend this container, I can once again hover over the different components. So if I open up this center content, when I hover over full width border top, I can see that the statement isn't captured in this code, so I'm going to select the one above. I have the search box on the left, and if I scroll down to 5/6 last, I can see that our summary statement is selected. When I open up this and drill down accordingly, so into the top news, into the body, and then open up the paragraph tag, which is where this paragraph would sit, I can then see the text that's in the code file that's being displayed on the web page. So whenever you go onto a website, just think of it as a bunch of code files behind the scene, but the web browser is able to interpret them and display the page in a much more user-friendly format. Now, unlike a web browser, our web scraping code that we write won't interpret the page's source code, and it won't display the code in a nicely presented way. But what we'll do in our code is write some code that filters through the page's source code, looking for the specific elements that we want, just like the example we walked through with this summary text. We can then extract whatever content we've instructed our program to extract. So the sequence of steps we go through to obtain data from a web page usually follows the same structure. We first request the content of a specific URL from the server, a little bit like typing in the URL into a web browser. We then download the content that is returned. What we then need to do is identify the elements of the page that we want to observe, and then we will extract that data and, if required, present it in a more user-friendly format. Now you may be thinking, Dean, this sounds very complicated, how am I going to do this? Well, this is where the requests and the beautiful soup libraries come into play. They have built-in features that are designed to make this straightforward. So all you need to know is that you can utilize these libraries, call upon specific methods from these libraries in order to get information from source code that you want. Now there's an important thing I want to note. When you request information from a server, it's the same as requesting this information via a web browser. You are sending a request to the server. Now when we use code to submit these requests, we can implement it so that we load pages much faster than a regular person who's clicking on a mouse. And what this will mean is that it will consume the website's server resources, which can obviously have a performance impact on the website that you're trying to obtain information from. Now this is why we need to be careful when we web scrape, because not all websites allow you to scrape information from them. So there are times when you can scrape data, but there are also times when you can't, and understanding the legalities of web scraping is important, just so you don't run into any trouble down the line. In the next video, I'll touch upon the web scraping legalities.